Welcome, everyone. This is part 2 of Releasing the Shame is Your Superpower, and we're talking about the war within, creating the war in our external environment. And we're excited to be here with Kelly Love. And yay, so let's just jump in. It's exciting.
Do an intro.
And that's kind of an intro.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you would add, Michael?
Hear a little bit more about you. Remind people a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and then we'll jump in. And
Okay, well, I'm Kelly Love, and I work specifically with people to release trauma from their body and also get in touch with their natural primal self through things like psychosomatic therapy and several other modalities. I'm really passionate about guiding people to understand the inner technology that they have so that they can heal themselves. I believe we all have this power. And so this is what I'm here for. I'm here as a guide to guide people into their wholeness.
Technology that they have so that they can heal
Somebody else has me on.
Yeah, Freya's trying to set it up so that she can, there you go, make comments.
To comment and put the link in, I had to bring it up. So
All good.
So yes, and Kelly has been through our practitioner program, and we're so excited for what she's creating in the world. And yes, were you complete there?
Yeah, I feel complete. I don't feel a need to share too much about me.
Yeah, and we don't really feel like we need to share too much because most people who are on are following and know us. And as Kelly said, we're all in the realm of releasing and healing trauma and guiding people through the process of getting in touch with who they are and being their full authentic expression by releasing all that they are not, which includes their stored trauma and emotions and limiting programming from childhood, and being able to just really tap into that true and vital essence of their expression. So
Yes. We love what we do. This is why we partner together. We love what we do.
Yes, we do. Yes, absolutely. So
anything you want to add, Michael?
Yeah.
I think we're ready to go into the topic here, which is actually a really exciting topic. It's around the, what's the title of it? War Within, yeah. War Within, and how it reflects in the war without. And we really feel like this is the key to everything. That everything that we see going around us, the chaos and the battles and the polarization and the
War.
The war, yeah, truly an all-out war, so a social war, a culture war, and actual people with guns killing other people wars that are going on, and that they're all tied in to the war within.
Yes.
May I ask a quick question really quick? Is it possible for you guys to put both of our screens online so we're both being viewed at the same time? I should have asked for that before and I forgot.
I think the only way to do that is to put it so like everybody is showing up.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, never mind then. We're good. Thought I'd ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so yes, we're excited about this too, because I truly believe that if enough people can do the healing work within themselves, that, and you know, like a big one is sexuality, and people are at war within themselves around their sexuality because we've been taught shame around that. And I really honestly believe that if we could heal the war within ourselves and integrate those parts of us that are in the shadow, that there would be peace in the world. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, somebody commented the different tribes, and it's part of the polarization.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we all separate ourselves into tribes, and some of them are more, have more of a history to them, and some of them are just because somebody thinks differently than us or disagrees about something that's happening, or has a different political philosophy. And we're all in our little tribal boundaries throwing rocks at each other as if we weren't actually all one. as if we weren't all brothers and sisters, that can get so much more done together, working together, than we ever will throwing rocks at each other.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And besides throwing rocks at each other, what about the rocks that we throw at ourselves? Because what we want to talk about today is how the lack of peace inside ends up being reflected in the world around us. And we can understand this from simple things of nature. What we're putting inside of ourselves is what's going to come out. As above, so below. So if what we're putting in ourselves is rottenness and negativity and negative self-talk, this is what's going to manifest in the world around us. And this is why when people go through so much pain and suffering and don't work on healing that, it ends up manifesting in their life and even more pain and suffering. And so the biggest service we can do for ourselves and do for this world is really to end the war inside. Because when we find the peace, then we start vibrating that out into the world, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly. And the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without, is a true and correct universal principle. It is always true. So what we're seeing in the world is the physical manifestation of the state that people are within themselves and the collective consciousness. So yes.
And I would like to offer maybe something for people to consider regarding the internal landscape that's going on, treating it like a garden. Most gardens don't grow without some attention and care to them. And if a garden ends up in disarray with weeds everywhere and plants dying and things turning brown or whatever, or getting infested with aphids, it's because of a lack of care. And so taking that time to tend to your own garden, to make sure your own garden is flourishing and healthy, because if it's not, you are only allowed to, you're only able to bring into this world what you yourself have actually experienced and attained. And this is why we are so passionate about talking about the effects of abuse, because we realize how damaging and how far reaching these effects are, and how possible it is to stop that cycle and try something new.
It is. It is. And we've experienced this, all of us, all three of us here, and witnessed it in the people we work with. It's so powerful. And the thing is that, as Kelly said, this attention to our own inner landscape, our own inner well-being, and the state that we are in is a reflection of the reverence, the self-reverence or lack thereof that we have, which again is all due to that abuse and programming from when we were very young. So this is why it's so important to do the healing work, right, Kelly?
Agreed. And I would think too that being disconnected from our nature and how we naturally function also further creates that dis-ease inside of us. One of the things that we wanted to talk about today was how the conflicts in our environment, like shame, abuse, and repression, how that contributes to the inner landscape. So the war within isn't just me, it's also taking in all that information that's coming from outside of me and saying, is this valuable for me? Is this a truth that I want to take on for myself? Or is it heaping on more shame? Is it abusive? Is it repressing my nature even more? Those things are going to contribute to that internal conflict.
Yes, and that inner voice that you're talking about that's coming back, it almost always can be traced back to the voice of an adult figure of power in our lives, whether that's a parent, a teacher, a preacher, somebody who we saw as an authority. And you look at a child and an adult saying, shame on you, to that child, and you just watch them crumble, right? And
Right.
or around our sexuality. I mean, I've seen children with a parent going, "That's disgusting, don't touch yourself," or "Cover yourself up, that's disgusting," that kind of thing. And those things go so deep, and they create a deep level of shame and trauma and disconnection, as you said,
Yes.
who we are.
And think
Right?
about how natural that is. Like how many times we see children exploring their bodies and finding, oh, wow, that feels nice. And they do it because it feels nice. Now imagine if that was our motivating factor, like, oh, this feels good. This feels really good. I want to give myself something that feels good, instead of shaming the very thing that is making us feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Separating us from something that is so natural as self-pleasure, and disconnecting that, it has long-lasting damaging effects. Freya, I want you to lean into that because you have a fascinating story.
Yes, like seriously, I mean, I never touched myself for pleasure until I was in my 40s. That's how deep the shame went from the religious program shaming in our community. And pleasure for women was not a thing. It just was not a thing. In 28 years of marriage, I had one orgasm 26 years into that, and that was it. Done.
And it was an accident, people. Accident.
Yeah, an accident. It wasn't like an intentional thing. And it's just in the religion, it was not a thing for women's pleasure to be important. So it was a cultural thing. And it's not just the religion that I came from. There are many, many women who don't belong to that faith who have never had an orgasm, and who've been shamed around masturbation, and men who've been shamed around masturbation. And it's rampant. It's huge.
It is. One of the other disconnects I want to touch on as well, and this is something Freya, Michael, and I, we talk about a lot, and it's something we incorporate into our sessions, is this very primal instinct to have a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
When emotions are heavy or pain is heavy, anger, whatever it is, as children, a lot of times what happens is we shame that very primal instinct that brings us back to homeostasis. We shame it out of children. I'll give you something to cry about.
Beaten out of them.
Beaten out of them too. Shamed and beaten out of them. I'll give you something to cry about. You keep crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Or stop throwing a temper tantrum. Stop making a scene. Stop doing this. And really, yes, it's heaping shame on them. And if what we could do instead is understand the nature of ourselves and why we're responding that way, and engage from that place of understanding, we would see a world of a difference. And one of the things we have to
here. I'll share one thing.
Yeah.
Our little boy Damien, he's 6 years old, and because we tapped into this when he was very, very small, we've never shamed him for throwing a temper tantrum. We've told him, you can't do that here. You need to take this into a quiet place and go, it's fine to feel your emotions and take it out there. You just don't take them out on other people. So we're teaching him how to emotionally release in a safe place that is not abusive to anyone else. And if we were to teach our children how to do this, it would change the world. Yes. It would change everything, because children are born knowing how to embody their emotions and to release them and not keep them stuck in. And it's when we stuff them down and over for years that then they become so intense that they have to break out and break free in very dysfunctional ways, whether that is in depression or whether that's in physical violence against another person, or emotional violence against another person, terrorizing, all of these things. There's so many ways, or even suicide. There are so many ways that this repression of emotions, the shaming of emotions, breaks free into the world in dysfunctional ways that cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, and
Moses.
Damien's response to it.
Yes.
how quickly he gets over it.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, he doesn't have a lot of conditioning. He doesn't have layers of trauma to work through. He's a brand new soul, you know, it's joined us. And so when he's been given a path to release that, the irritation or the anger or whatever, and he goes and does it, and he comes back and he's so happy and cheerful and I love you, and he doesn't carry it with him. The anger or whatever it was that bothered him, he doesn't carry it with him. And that's, to me, is the biggest validation on all of it.
And we see this in nature too with animals, how animals are, they use very primal instinctual things to bring themselves back to homeostasis. One thing that we talk about a lot with our clients is, you know, if we're in the wilderness and there's a predator chasing a prey, primal instinct kicks in, the flight kicks in, and the animal starts running for its life. And when it finally reaches safety, what it does is it shakes its body, it shakes it until it literally shakes out the fear. It's literally shaking out the very thing that destabilized it to bring itself back to homeostasis. This is also part of why we talk about using our body movement, our sound, our breath, because we want our whole being to release the energy of what that was that freaked us out in that moment.
Yes, exactly. And they don't carry it unless it's happened too many times.
We want our whole being to release.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, unless the animal has been.
So this is what I'm here for.
I gotta do this.
To guide people into their wholeness.
This technology.
All good. It's all perfect.
But unless the animal has been so thoroughly conditioned that it's holding, that it, you know, it isn't able to release the trauma, and it holds years of conditioning. You find animals like that where they treat everybody like they're going to hit them. They're vicious. They're vicious because they're defensive, and it takes a lot of work to clear that out of an animal. Animals are, that's another reason why animals are a good example of it. If they you know, something happens, they can release it, they're done. But if you got a dog that's been stuck in a cage for years and abused, it's going to be just like any human. We hold the trauma, it builds up, and it affects how we interact with everything.
Yeah, and I think we might have talked about this last week, the flinch effect, where when we experience a repeated pain or trauma, often like you're talking about, an abused dog, we'll take the other example of an animal that cannot go to a safe place. What happens is anytime a hand comes towards that dog, if that dog has only received abuse or mostly abuse, any hand, whether it's a gesture of love, it's gonna freak and probably bite. And this is what humans do too. I mean, imagine we have all of this, for those of us that have unresolved pain inside of us, the world becomes a dangerous place. Everything that many things that come at us seem like a threat, whether they're a threat or not, they seem like a threat. And so you see a lot of people living on the defense or snapping back or being physically violent because that is their reality. The world is dangerous and they're always trying to protect themselves.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing in the current social situation. We're seeing this all the time in social media and everything. People are, the culture of violence is so ingrained in people in this culture of fear and lack of safety that as soon as anybody disagrees with someone else's viewpoint, it's an attack. It's an attack. And
you go to war.
They go to war.
Because it feels scary. It feels like the safety is being threatened.
Yeah.
And so the very primal way that people respond is to defend and attack. Yeah. That's very primal.
Yes. And those two energies are those energies attract each other.
Yeah. And if you're not secure internally, not from a solid space, you're more, it's like you're standing on a precipice. You're more unstable. Yeah, your beliefs, you have to be right. You know, you have to play the right wrong game, and you have to be right because you've been, you know, society conditions very, very strongly around being wrong is such a bad thing.
Yeah, there's a shame around being wrong.
Yeah, and so if our beliefs are threatened as not being right, that means we're wrong and we have to attack. But if we come from a solid base of knowing who we are and not having so much fear and not having so much fear around being wrong, then when somebody comes up with an opposing belief, we can just listen. We can disagree.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Or we maybe learn something and accept a new belief or a new idea, or we can just say, well, I don't think so, and not be threatened and feel like we have to shut that person down as some kind of threat to us.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. One of the other things we wanted to discuss today that contributes to the war within, which is contributing to the collective dis-ease that we're feeling, is this separation from one another. One of the things that pain and trauma have the ability to do is create separation. And the reason why, like, I'll speak from a personal example. When my daughter died, that pain was just so fucking massive, overwhelming. Really, I thought my head was going to explode, and I had to do anything to silence it. And what I started noticing after a while is that people don't want to keep hearing about how sad I am and how much this hurts and how much I'm missing her. And so what I found myself doing was retreating, finding more isolation instead of asking for what I needed. And so this is oftentimes what happens with people who've gone through a lot of pain and trauma as well, is they end up retreating further and further and further and further, because for me, I felt like, who could relate to me? Who can possibly relate to me? Why even say anything?
Yeah, and this is true for many people. It's like it comes to the place of nobody can possibly understand how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm alone. There's no one. And part of this, again, comes from the shaming around openly expressing our emotions.
Yeah.
It becomes more important for our immediate comfort. That takes precedence over somebody else's deep pain, you know, even if it's a loved one.
Yeah. There's
We're not
people
willing
are
to
so
sit with
uncomfortable.
them in it.
They're so uncomfortable witnessing someone else's emotions and pain that they shut them down.
And this, again, I think goes back to what are some of the things that cause this, this war to perpetuate inside of us. One of the things that I think also contributes to that is just this lack of accepting death and pain as a part of life. It's a part of life. It's not a punishment. It's a part of life. We look at trees, plants, animals, they all die and they're all supporting the new life that's emerging. So when we can understand that death is a part of life, pain is a part of life, we no longer have to try everything to try to keep it away from us, including the very people that are going through pain and suffering. We actually can embrace one another. And this is a lot of, there were many ancient cultures that embraced this, and Jews were one of them. In Judaism, you know, studying the Old Testament for many years, one of the things that I really valued was some of the traditions that they had. So when somebody would die, it's like they would have a week-long mourning process. They're giving space and voice for the deep pain and sorrow that people feel for letting go. Where are we creating that space? We have separated ourselves from natural life.
Even our funerals are emotionally dead affairs.
Yes.
And anybody that acts out, including the one closest to the departed, even they're expected to hold up. And, you know, like you said, when is their time? Are they only left alone in a bedroom
someone
by themselves?
openly crying at a funeral is shamed, and they say, she's not handling it very well. Somebody should give her some sedation and do the kind thing. Actually, it's the kind thing for them, because then they don't have to feel.
And they don't have to do anything about it. They can just sit there in their ignorance and feel fine.
Yes, and the thing is that this grieving, like you were talking about, there are many cultures like you described who have a grieving period. I mean, literally throwing themselves on the body or the casket or whatever and wailing it out, like physically expressing their pain. And then there was a year-long, in some cultures, a year-long mourning period where people wore black, and that signified the loss of a loved one. And then everybody they met would say, "Oh, who are you wearing this for?"
I remember as a child living in Greece and seeing widows walk around in black. And they you know, they were kind of scary at that age. They seemed witchy. And now I understand that that's what they were doing. They were grieving a loved one, and they were letting the world know, hey, I'm grieving. I mean, imagine if we could just, if I could just wear black and be like, I'm grieving right now, and people surround me and hold me instead of shame me for fucking feeling.
Hold the space.
Yeah,
for
and
you.
now we've got a trend into, oh, well, let's just do a celebration of life for this person, and it's a happy thing, and we're supposed to all be happy, and we're doing this, and it's completely shutting down and disacknowledging the grieving process that needs to take place. And it's actually, what's true is that it doesn't have to be a separate thing. It doesn't have to be a celebration or a grieving. It can be both. You can do both at the same time.
Absolutely. There was something else that came to my mind, and I wanted to touch on it right here. It's going to come back to me later.
And as an example, to share, recently when my son passed away, my oldest daughter was at the graveside service. You know, we couldn't travel, and only people who were in the area could be there. And she was there, and she started crying over him, like holding his hand and like weeping out loud. And somebody told her, "You need to stop crying now." And she was like, "No." And she just let it out. And a whole bunch of the siblings all gathered around her, siblings, cousins, like family members, and they gathered in a circle and just cried. So her courage to go against the belief that being strong is not sharing your emotions changed that whole experience for everyone.
Absolutely.
So now I need a Kleenex.
Yeah.
So we're here to change the world. And if people get uncomfortable with that, that's okay.
Yeah.
We've been far too comfortable for far too long about the way things are.
And the reality is when we give expression to what's inside, it's creating space for something else. And whatever that chaos is, whatever that turmoil is, it does settle down more. I remember just recently going through releasing a love, and it ended in a way that was very unexpected for me. And it happened at a time where, you know, COVID just started. I left my life in Costa Rica and wasn't sure when I was going to be able to come back. Many things. And it's like, I watched so many things dissolve. And I think in the past, I would have just like held it in and found a way to survive. And this time, I feel like letting it rip with my emotions really helped bring me back to homeostasis quicker. And what I did with my emotions, and this is also part of connecting back to our nature, okay? Our emotions aren't just these random things that fly into us. They are created. So what are the circumstances that create those emotions? So for me, when what I've learned, because I didn't do this when my daughter died, I didn't have any of these tools. And so I suffered for many years. So what I do now with like this situation with this person who I released, I stay curious with the emotions. When they come up, I say, what's under that? What's under that? And I keep asking the why and the why and the why. And there's going to be many whys. And it's staying curious with them and then addressing what's under the emotion. That's where the wholeness comes from.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So we want to give you some ideas as well as how to shift this internal war. You know, we've talked a lot about what can cause this internal war. And it's very obvious how it's manifesting in this world. We have a lot of people disconnected from their nature, okay? They're not in touch with their emotional body. We go to a doctor because, you know, we have chronic headaches and our lives are stressed the fuck out. Like, okay, so you get some migraine medicine, but you're not doing anything about the stress.
Mm-hmm.
It's being completely disembodied, dissociated from what it means to be human. And so one of the things the three of us discussed was looking to nature for guidance. And what do I mean by that? So right now we are experiencing a collective rest, a collective cocooning. Whether we want it or not, it's here. And what we're seeing is nature is healing and regenerating quickly on a massive global scale. And nature didn't need to be told how to heal herself.
Right.
She understands how to heal herself. It is in her to heal herself. And this is what is so incredible about nature. It is driven to thrive and survive and heal. And so how can we tap into what we are naturally, who we are naturally, to speed up that healing process? Because it doesn't need to take hundreds of years to heal. It doesn't need to take a lifetime to heal. Michael and Freya, you two were, I would say, the fifth training I did and healing, and it probably leveled me up 2 levels in 3 weeks, people. 3 weeks. It is simply learning to understand how your body works and how to engage it in a way to facilitate the healing process.
Yeah.
We don't need a think tank. We don't need governments. We just need to understand how to navigate internally. And so this is what we're going to talk about.
To literally go into the body and listen to what it's telling you.
Yeah.
And then into the emotion that's coming up and fully express it and release. I mean, it's so simple, but we've been so programmed out of it that it's absolutely impossible to just tell someone how to do it and that they can do it. Because we're so conditioned to do the exact opposite of what is needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not broken, right? And neither is the earth. You know, what we think we can do to it, 1,000,000 years from now, which is not a long time for the earth, there won't be a trace of us left on the earth.
If we don't change things.
It will cleanse itself, and our bodies are like that too. It cleanses itself. But we have so many beliefs around it. We have so much conditioning. We have so many layers of blocks keeping us from our normal processes, and that's what has to be removed. And that's all we do. We just get the stuff out of the way so you can be you. You can be your true natural self. We're not fixing you because you were never broken.
We're putting, what we like to say, we're putting things back into alignment. We're guiding you back into alignment with your truest nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
From
So,
the inside out. From the
yes, from the inside out. Some of the things that we want to touch on and we want to highlight with what we see in nature as well is, how is nature getting to this place of regeneration and healing? Slowing down.
Yes.
Slowing down is number one. For people who have, this is especially true for people who have experienced a lot of pain and trauma. Oftentimes it's so chaotic and so painful, and it's too challenging to, or maybe it's too scary. Maybe it's too scary to face. And so what we see a lot of people doing is managing everybody else, trying to fix everybody else, or finding ways to be distracted and be busy. And it keeps the person from actually tuning into what's inside. And so number one, slow down. Anything you want to add to that?
I totally, absolutely 100% agree. And this is one of the things that is actually bringing out people's mental health issues right now with the slowing down and the isolation, is that they're being forced to feel what their busyness has been showing up as a coping mechanism to help them avoid feeling. And it's really, really intense. And so if we were taught how to go through this process and how to release the emotions and the trauma that's stored in the body, if we were taught that, and we could absolutely change the world in one generation, because then the next generation would be taught how to effectively allow their emotions to flow through and be processed and expressed in a healthy way. And like, the entire world would be changed in one generation. It's that simple.
Because it is our nature, and the next generation is going to know how to do that. It just won't be taught out of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We teach our children out of being healthy humans. We don't teach them. We call it socialization, but the socialization is taking us away from who we are. It's fragmenting us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and those are great points. The next step is, when you slow down and listen and you find where the misalignment is, shift the pattern.
Yes.
A lot of people think just being aware of something or understanding how something works, all of a sudden, poof, abracadabra, I'm healed. And guess what? You're not, because it took years and years of patterning and shaping to create the person that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And while it doesn't need to take a lifetime, it does take work. What were you saying, Freya?
And that mental level shift is not going to change anything except creating the awareness for you to be able to then do the work to do the healing. The mental level shift is not the healing itself. It's the first step only, because we store the trauma on the mental, emotional, physical, and energetic levels, all four.
Absolutely.
So that's only the first step, and it's necessary. So, like, yes, celebrate the new awarenesses and now do something about it.
Yeah. That's why we're so passionate about experiential processes over
book learning.
Over book learning, or having a nice guided meditation is great. But what are you doing to change things on a cellular level? What are you doing to change your habits? What are you doing to change your habits of thinking?
Changing the subconscious belief that's underneath there, because that mental, that's not touching the subconscious, and the subconscious wins every single time.
You've been bathed in a particular way of being. You don't just step out of the bath and have it all gone. It's permeating you. It's permeating your being. And you just got to get it removed so that you can go back to who you are, who you truly are.
And the other thing that I want to touch on when it comes to the mental aspect, so we've touched on this before, and I want to reiterate it. Where your pain and trauma is stored in your brain is in your mammalian brain. Where you're able to reason with the pain and trauma is your neocortex. So until it gets transferred from the mammalian brain into the neocortex, you can't reason yourself into healthiness. It's not possible.
Yeah, that's like on the physical level, it's like trying to out supplement a bad diet. You can't.
Exactly. Or like if you want to go jogging and live on a diet of Twinkies,
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yeah.
still going to be unhealthy.
Mm.
So what we want to do now is talk about like, okay, so we've slowed down, we've listened, we have the awareness, we want to shift our patterns. So how are we going to shift those patterns? And this is why I believe part of understanding how to shift the patterns is understanding how our nature is, how we function. Michael or Freya, do either one of you want to lean into that and why we use the modalities that we use? I mean, I'm happy to, and I would love to share.
Yeah, it's the reason that we use the modalities that we use is because, as we've been talking about here, the mental shift is only the first step. And so when we use a single modality, that works on one level and generally one level only. And unless people are actually combining modalities, which is what we do and what we love to do, and I'm not saying that we're the only ones that do this, because there are other really powerful healers who guide people on the path of healing. If anyone tells you they're healing you, then they run from them, because they're actually just guiding you on through the map of healing yourself. Yeah. And it's your power that comes from within. And it's these combinations of modalities that work on the various levels and combining that so that it works simultaneously on all four levels, because that's like trauma is stored in the body, and all four of those pieces of it are literally entangled in the nervous system. And so you can't pull on one string and another and another and another and be done. It's like it all has to pull out at the same time, because that's how it all came in when it was experienced. So combining things, these modalities, so that you're actually using your voice, your breath, your movement, and sensation all combined at the same time to release the emotions that are stored, which is how we store trauma, is the emotions that we weren't able to experience and express at the time of the trauma has to come out. You don't have to re-experience the trauma. You don't have to be re-traumatized by the process. And yes, it's still an intense experience. It's an uncomfortable experience that creates so much freedom and lightness and just like beauty once you tap into your own power of being able to release that. And it's amazing. Do you have something to add, Michael?
One thing about it is it just, it works.
It works.
It's effective.
It's gone. Like
Yeah.
it's not next time you're triggered, then it's back, because that's what's the pattern that we have. This is the pattern we have to shift. It's just using coping mechanisms to better deal with and live with the trauma, which is what most healing is all about, is just giving you coping mechanisms to deal with it better.
So you can function in society while carrying that trauma around with you, instead of releasing it and being able to be your authentically expressed self, without all the layers and without all the, all the baggage that comes with trauma.
Yeah.
Freya,
So,
will you lean into, for the audience, so they understand, because many of these people aren't going to understand our terminology. When you say sound, breath, movement, sensation, what does that mean to you?
can I hear you now?
Excuse me?
Okay, now I can.
You went out for a second.
Oh, okay. For our audience who may not be completely familiar with terminology like we are, would you lean into sound, breath, movement, sensation a little bit more and explain what that means?
So your voice is like literally expressing through your voice those emotions, and that's coming from your power center. It's not coming from your vocal cords. It's like a literal, like purging of the emotional level of that trauma. It's and then through your breath, because you have to have breath moves the energy, and then the sensation is like really allowing yourself to feel it all, like the sense, like feeling every bit of it. And the movement is the body movement. So quite honestly, in like for rage, it's like witnessing a 2-year-old on the floor having a fucking tantrum.
They're
like,
masters of it.
they're masters. They really are.
They're so
Like-
good. You watch them in awe. You're like, oh my gosh, you know. But watch that 2-year-old when they're done. They go back and they're playing. And
They're happy. Like
They're
30
done.
seconds later, they're done.
Yeah.
Calm and happy. Yeah.
They're not
And-
holding grudge.
And part of, I want to lean in a little bit more to to what you described. So when we're talking about sound coming from the guts, this is actually where most of the dense emotions come from. And so expressing emotions from the guts versus the throat, the strained, cut off throat where you haven't been able to express for a long time, sounds really differently. It sounds kind of like, versus, you know, it's coming with your power, with your fucking power, and letting it rip instead of strangling yourself like you've been strangled this whole time. I don't want to be strangled anymore. I want to
Primal.
be free.
It's primal. It is
It's primal.
a whole different place, and it's so incredibly powerful. And I don't know if we've ever had one person on our table that could automatically do that.
Do what?
Like
Go into that
express
primal
from that
release
primal space. From
statement.
that primal-
Did y'all forget about me?
No,
yeah.
they had the
no,
word.
I mean immediately without any guidance.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. Oh, yeah. You definitely.
You definitely did. Yeah, absolutely. And everybody gets there. But I don't feel like we've ever had anyone that didn't need any guidance to take it to that place.
Yeah. Because it's been
Because
conditioned
it's
out
so
of us.
conditioned out.
And when it happens and you're experiencing it, you're witnessing it, it'll raise the hair on the back of your neck.
Oh god.
You know?
Especially when you get like a 6 foot something guy that's so strong, and like we had somebody actually break our table.
Yeah. But
Yeah, that's the kind of energy we want people to show up with, right? Because that's what's been pent up in us forever. And this is why using our breath is so important too. It's not just our voice, it's our breath, because we've been suffocated. We've literally been fucking suffocated for so long. And I can look at my body and many other people's bodies who have gone through trauma, and I can see that they have had a repeated state of freeze. Like, for example, let's just look at me really quick. I'm really bony right here, okay? You can see all these bones. This is from a couple of things: experiencing a lot of grief, so tissue drainage, just sadness, sorrow leaving my body or holding on to my body. And it's also living in a repeated state of freeze where my breathing slowed down. And I developed a low, a shallow breathing pattern, low blood pressure, because it's this making myself small, so to protect myself. And so what we're doing to clients and what we're inviting clients to do is push past that and breathe in all of your breath of life and just go for it.
Yeah, breathe in life. Start living again. And I had one other client who had that pattern even more than you, and literally anything that she did that created any exertion at all, she would get dizzy. She'd get dizzy. And what I noticed was that it was anything that required breath. She would get dizzy, like she'd literally have to sit down because she was going to pass out. And I asked her, I said, when did you stop breathing? You're not breathing. You have to breathe life in so that you have the oxygen to actually exist. And it went back to her holding herself small, like you say, and holding her breath, hoping that her father wouldn't notice her, because then she'd get beat. This is a deep trauma response, right? It's fear.
It is. And this is why we coach our clients to show up differently, because we want to interrupt that pattern. We want to introduce a new anchor point of reality to live from.
Mhm.
And then this is why with our movement, we really encourage the clients to let it rip, because for those of us who have gone through severe shaming, repression, oppression, abuse, whatever, being able to defend ourselves has been something that was taken from us. And so we're introducing a new pattern as well. We're showing people, yes, you do have the power to stand up for yourself. You do have the voice to stand up for yourself. And we trick the brain into thinking, oh, we finally fixed it. We fixed this problem.
Yeah, and it wasn't the brain at all.
Yeah, nothing was broken. It's just putting things back into place. This is what we tell our clients. You aren't broken. There aren't pieces of you missing. It's simply putting things back into alignment.
Mm-hmm. And maybe reclaiming those parts of you that you've tried to dissociate from and buried. So in a way, it's a remembering. It's not that the pieces are gone. It's that they're being repressed and hidden because of shame.
Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but I wanted each of us to share a personal story of when we experienced a war within, how that manifested in our life, and when we took some practical steps to shift that, how did that manifest in our lives as well? Anyone dying to go first?
Oh, you go ahead.
Oh, there's so, this just happens over and over again. You know, you start on one level and you clear one war, and then you realize there's other battles. And so a lot, you know, the healing process is clearing these battles. So you're no longer fighting yourself. Because, you know, how can you have power, and how can you have personal power when you're turned against yourself? All your energies are going against yourself, and that there's nothing left for anything outside yourself, or less is available. But when you can regain that power again. So, I mean, if I go back to, oh, wow, like I got a smorgasbord.
Which one to choose from?
Well, let's go into, you know, I had a lot of relationships. I jumped from relationship to relationship. And Freya and I have been together now for 10 years, and that's my longest, except for my first marriage, which was longer than that. But anyway, and I spent so much time with these, you know, getting into these abusive relationships, or these neglectful relationships, or, you know, and it was always an external thing for me. I kept marrying the wrong person, and kept having to deal with all these dysfunctional people. And it wasn't until I realized that it was what was going on in me that was creating all of it, and let that go, that I was able to get into a really most amazing relationship of my life. But because of the battles, you know, it's like I get into these relationships and getting these external battles, and I was so busy with the external battles that I couldn't pay any attention to the internal battles. And it was a very nasty little cycle where I would get out of one, and rather than taking a look within and saying, what's going on here, that I keep getting into these kind of situations, I'd jump right into another and be battling again. Again, putting back on the back burner the internal battle. And the internal battle was my sense of self-worth, my thinking that I had to find self-worth in a relationship, and that my partner had to meet these. You know, my partners at the time, they definitely had their problems, but they were dealing with a pretty dysfunctional person. They were dealing with somebody who was not going to ever be satisfied. that,
The nice guy.
yeah, I came from, then we talked about the nice guy, bad boy paradigm. And
Last week.
yeah, we talked about that last week. And I was definitely in the nice guy paradigm, believing that I could get my needs met by being a nice guy and manipulating people into wanting to meet my needs, not realizing that I needed to meet my own needs first, and that nobody ever would be able to meet those needs. And again, we talked about this last week too, where we live in a universe of love, but we find ourselves lacking love, and it's the craziest thing ever. It's how we've been conditioned to believe that we're not worthy of love, and that we have to find it elsewhere, and that we have to earn it.
Well, and that inability to find it elsewhere is just proof that we're not lovable.
Yeah,
So that's part of the war
it
within.
feeds
right?
it all. It's a nasty.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find out, when you discover that you are worthy of love, and that you can find it from within, and you can fill up your cup from within, from the abundant love that we're surrounded with, and that we don't have to do anything to earn it. It's part of our birthright. Then when you engage with people, it's from a completely different place. You're not pulling, you're not trying to take, you don't need anything from them. You're meeting them as equals with, and you're ready to give. And that person, you're going to draw in somebody at that point who is also ready to give because they're secure in their own self.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing, Michael. I sort of have a similar story. We have many similar stories. And one of the patterns I noticed in my life that just created so much chaos was caretaking for everyone else. I did it so much. I gave up. I think I gave anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a month to my church every month to support missionaries and various things that were happening out there. I volunteered to work with abused foster children for a couple years. It doesn't even matter all the things I did. I did a lot of things except work on myself.
Right.
And what I noticed is I kept attracting different types of chaos into my life, whether it was in my romantic relationships or my friendships or even jobs, like bosses I ended up having. So much of it, I ended up attracting the very things that I didn't want in my life because I hadn't taken care of anything inside.
Yeah.
And this came to a head with me in my dating life a couple of years back, which was when I decided to start doing some serious work. And all my relationships were blowing up. All of them. I could not keep a relation. Well, I had one relationship that was 1 year and 8 months or something like that, completely dysfunctional the whole time. And before that, I couldn't keep a relationship for more than 4 months. And it got to the point where every relationship I brought into my life, I would walk away feeling hurt. And my friend was like, well, maybe it's you. And I was like, fuck you. I'm nice. That's not me. And the reality is that I hadn't solved all that rejection and lack of love and abuse that I had experienced. And so that was what I thought I was worth. And so that's what I kept accepting. And it wasn't until I started talking to my therapist and he started explaining to me why I do the things I do that I was like, oh, wow, okay, there goes that shame. I don't feel bad about that anymore. What can I do to bring myself back into alignment? And so I took a break from dating. I shifted my patterns. I said, okay, I'm definitely not making good choices right now. I'm not sure how to make good choices right now. So I took a pause and I became very cautious about whose energy I would invite into my life. And I erred on the side of caution until I could bring my intuition back online and until I could do some more deep healing work to where I'm not making decisions from a place of neediness, of needing someone to love me, of needing someone to give me emotional affection, of needing someone to praise me. It's like, I find that in myself. And now I'm going to come to somebody from a place of wholeness and relate from there. And now the relationships are vastly different, vastly different. I have men in my life who are badass men, who show up in integrity, who do the work, who are emotionally available, who are doing amazing things in this world. That is the shift that took place because I took the time to tend to my own garden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And whoever told us that being needy was a virtue. That is not sexy. That is not, to have somebody need you or to have somebody want you, which is more desirable. Having experienced both, been on both sides of that answer, my answer is pretty clear on that. So much better to be wanted, desired, just have somebody choose into you every day.
Yes.
Instead of feeling like, well, I guess we've got so much invested in this relationship, we might as well go on, we just don't stay in that space, and it's a beautiful way to be, so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, one of the first things that comes to mind as far as having a war within myself is the war of being in a very highly sexually oppressive religious environment where it was a polygamous environment, so it was very patriarchal, and there's no way that I was able to express who I am really on any level. Other than the caretaking for everyone else. Yes, I'm a caring person, but I was overdoing that part of it, like you expressed, Kelly. But to be sexually expressed in that, in a place where you're not supposed to ask for anything as a woman, your needs are not in any way considered. I mean, a woman is just supposed to, they're not relevant at all. And if you ask for anything, you're a jealous bitch. And this kind of thing, it was so in conflict with who I am, all of it, as a powerful, fully expressed, vocal, sexually expressed, and none of me was able to be expressed. It's like there's this guideline of what a woman's supposed to look like and must be like, or you go to hell. And so everything was from a place of fear. And when I finally realized that, the only thing keeping me in that religion was my fear, and that there really wasn't any truth in it for me, that I had the courage to leave and then do the healing work. And what a difference in my life to have this full and honest expression of who I am. That's really authentic and powerful and beautiful, and being in that place, which is a very, very painful place. And quite honestly, I had thoughts very frequently at some periods of my life there where I wanted to leave this world. I wanted to kill myself. I didn't want to be there, but my children held me there, and I'm so glad I'm still here. and to have chosen a whole different path and integrated those aspects of who I am that are actually really beautiful. They're not evil and bad like the religion taught. So coming out of that conflict of this is who I must be and anything else is wicked and evil and going to hell, to actually embracing all of those pieces of who I am, that was a huge war within me. And
now, Freya, what's your reality like now? Going from a dried up desert to what? Tell us. What do people have to look forward to?
Orgasmic full body orgasms, like it's like, oh God, it's like completely opposite. Like a juicy, blissful, turned on life. Living life.
It's not just a sex life, it's an entire life, people.
Whole life. It's my whole life. And yes, I went from The Walking Dead that had to be to survive in that environment to fully feeling everything. And yes, the painful stuff hurts even more. And yet my whole life, when I look back on it, was just painful at that point and dead. And now, like that love that I can share, like with Michael and with other partners in my life at various times, and like my family, even my family, my children, are my interactions with my kids, it's all on a whole different level. It's authentic, it's real, it's powerful. And to witness how their lives have shifted because I dared to shift, that's been amazing.
Ooh, Freya, I wish you could see my arms. I have goosebumps. That last line was powerful.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this is the reality that we want to leave. This is the taste of reality that we want to leave in your mouth, of looking at 3 people from 3 different backgrounds and seeing how we came from places of deep oppression, suppression, repression, abuse, trauma, pain, all of it. And we did what we needed to do to slow down, listen, shift our patterns, ask for guidance. And it was in a short amount of time. And now we each are creating the lives that we want, and we're living with such peace and confidence. And this is what we want to offer to the world. This is why we're doing this series, because we want to remove the shame. We don't want people stuck in the fucking lies anymore. We want you to come into the light of the truth.
Do either of our beautiful ladies who's joined us here have any questions? I'd like to make sure that we create space for any questions if we have them.
You'll need to unmute first.
Or any questions from the Facebook people as well before we end this.
So there are 3 other people here. Mihaela, Ilona, Diane. Any of you have questions? If not, then we will definitely have this posted for anybody else to watch, and we will certainly interact with questions that are posted online. So.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for showing up.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else either one of you want to share?
I feel like this is a really, really great place to come to completion.
We'll leave contact information for everybody, for both of us, and Kelly, in the comments.
Yeah, we'll all be in there so we can all answer any comments that come up on Facebook, because we're all tagged in the posts.
Yep. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and I hope you have a beautiful day.
See you next week on the next episode.